The expiration date. Why immortality is a trap for the soul and a Ponzi scheme for the ego. Let me start with a confession that might revoke my tough guy card, or at least get me suspended from the Street Scholar faculty lounge. I used to be seduced by the fantasy of living forever. I'm talking about the full Highlander package. I wasn't necessarily planning on decapitating anyone in a parking garage with a katana while Queen blasts on the soundtrack, though, let's be honest, traffic in Tennessee sometimes makes that option appealing, but the idea of sticking around forever, of beating the house, seemed like the ultimate hustle. I found myself in the vitamin aisle, you know the one, it smells like powdered kelp, sawdust, and quiet desperation, thinking if I just ate enough kale, bought the right expensive urine-generating supplements, and listened to the right YouTube doctor with suspiciously white teeth and a tan that defies the laws of physics, I could slip past the Grim Reaper like a shoplifter ducking a napping security guard at Walmart. But somewhere between reading Immanuel Kant's critiques on reason and watching people in a corporate break room slowly turn into emotionally hydrated furniture, it hit me, this immortality obsession is structurally insane. It is a cosmic Ponzi scheme where the ego is the scammer and the soul is the mark. It's like the plot of The Wolf of Wall Street, but instead of penny stocks, we're being sold extra decades that are completely worthless because we don't know how to spend the Tuesday afternoons we already have. Look at the culture I'm standing in. It's like the set of Logan's Run, but instead of a cool, sexy sci-fi dystopia with laser effects, it's just people getting Botox, panic attacks, and financing Audis they can't afford. Advertisements whisper, you can be forever young, like Satan went into marketing and found his true calling. They frame death as a glitch, a rude interruption of your self-care journey, a customer service error that you should be able to speak to the manager about. But when I strip away the soft focus Instagram filters and apply the cold, hard science of logic, I realize something harsh: death isn't the bug in the system. It's the operating principle. If life is a movie, death is not the studio cancellation, it is the closing credits. The tragedy isn't that the credits roll. The tragedy is living a 3-hour film, something bloated and self-indulgent like a bad director's cut, where nothing happens because you were too busy checking your phone to deliver a line worth hearing. If I take my own claim seriously, that death itself isn't the tragedy, only a bad death is, then I owe myself a full cross-examination. A bad death is getting taken out by a drunk driver while picking my nose at a red light. It's a comedy of errors without the comedy. A bad death is dying in a fluorescent-lit room that smells like bleach, boiled cabbage, and institutionalized regret, wondering if life had a secret code you never figured out because you were too busy filing tax returns. But death itself, that is the engine. It is the friction that creates the spark. Without the end, there is no story. There are just pages, blank and infinite, waiting for a sentence that never arrives. It's the never-ending story, but without the flying luck dragon, just a never-ending Monday morning meeting where Dave from accounting keeps reading bullet points off a PowerPoint slide for 10,000 years. So let me drag Kant into this. The man was about as fun as a tax audit, and I imagine his parties were just people sitting in silence contemplating duty, but his logic is an industrial-grade tool. His categorical imperative says, act only according to a maxim you could will as a universal law. So I ask myself, could I rationally will a universe where nobody dies? If I run that simulation in my head, it fails instantly. No one leaves the room. Nobody graduates. The planet turns into a cosmic hoarder house, full of old grudges, unfinished projects, and ex-boyfriends that literally never go away. Imagine a world where your great-great-great-grandfather is still criticizing your career choices from the couch. The logistics are absurd. Resources collapse, generations bottleneck, and Black Friday never ends because nobody ever stops shopping. But the deeper failure isn't logistical, it's motivational. If I had 10,000 years to fix my character, write the book I keep threatening to write, clean up my addictions, and reconcile with everyone I've ever wronged, why would I do any of it today? I know myself. I'd procrastinate for centuries. I'd spend 300 years deciding which font best expresses my authentic voice. Give me an eternity and I'll manufacture an eternity of excuses. It's like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day before he learns the lesson: if there are no consequences, there is no growth. The deadline is what makes the work real. Without the dead line, there is no line at all, just a smudge. So if I universalize immortality, I don't get a heroic civilization of wise beings, I get a cosmic waiting room where everyone's number is never. We become metaphysical moss, clinging, consuming, existing, but never becoming. It's the supersize me, approach to life, more years, more time, more everything, but it's all empty calories. I see people bored out of their skulls on a random Sunday afternoon, scrolling like digital zombies, and then the same people say they want to live forever. You're bored with 24 hours, what exactly do you plan to do with 24 million? I see this pattern already. I don't need zombies from George Romero movies to understand the undead. I see them in line at the DMV, in cubicles under humming fluorescent lights draining the vitamin D from their souls. These are the walking dead. Not evil people, just people who traded living for surviving. They made a silent pact. I'll silence my conscience if you keep renewing my health insurance. That is the real contagion. That is the real plague. Not disease, fear. Fear of discomfort, fear of change, fear of the end, and fear of the end is the fear that kills the beginning. It reminds me of the opening scenes of Joe versus the volcano, where the fluorescent lights buzz like angry insects and the life force is slowly sucked out of Tom Hanks. That isn't a comedy, it's a documentary about the American corporate condition. Seneca, that old Roman Stoic who probably would have been a great podcast guest, diagnosed this centuries ago. Life is long enough if we use it well. But we don't. We scroll and stall and distract ourselves because we're terrified of the curtain dropping. Instead of acting, we rehearse. Instead of performing, we wait for permission. Instead of living, we focus on not dying. We behave like actors who spend the whole show worrying about the blackout instead of delivering a single honest line. When I imagine immortality in this context, I don't see freedom. I see an infinite delay, eternal procrastination, a cosmic, later, that never becomes, now. This is where the scholar of the streets meets the conspiracy realist. When I look at the power structures, the corporate boards, the globalist think tanks, the people Daniel Estulin and Jim Marrs warned us about, I don't see benevolent leaders. I see terrified egos trying to become gods in a dying mall. They don't want us immortal, they want us undead. They want a workforce just healthy enough to produce, too scared of death to revolt, and too sedated by Netflix to ask, why am I here? It's the Matrix battery concept, plain and simple. The Gnostics called this place the Kenoma, a flawed copy, a prison. They believed archons, cosmic middle managers, feed on our attachment to matter. When I read David Icke or Joseph P. Farrell, I don't have to buy every reptilian detail to see the pattern. The system is engineered to keep you fixated on survival. If I am terrified of death, I am easy to control. I will trade my liberty for safety. I will trade my soul for one more hit of dopamine. But here is where the absurdity goes nuclear. The transhumanists, the techno-sorcerers, the futurist alchemists of Silicon Valley who believe, with a straight face, that they can upload consciousness, clone themselves, or somehow beat the game. They act like the human soul is a software file. Control+C consciousness, Control+V into a new body. Did they hear themselves? The way they talk about the soul, you'd think God runs on Windows 95. Let me lay this out with the clearest street logic I've got. A clone of me is not me. It doesn't matter if the scientist used my DNA, my RNA, my freckles, my bad knees, my exact genetic blueprint like some biological photocopy machine, it is still not me. It is another human being. A separate consciousness, a separate soul, a separate interior universe placed behind its own set of eyes. You can duplicate the hardware, but you cannot duplicate the driver. This is the classic transporter problem from Star Trek, but nobody on the Enterprise ever wants to talk about it because it ruins the vibe. If you dematerialize Zerga in Tennessee and rematerialize him in Paris, did you move me? Or did you kill me and build a copy in France? The Zerga in Paris thinks he's me, he has my memories, he cracks my jokes, but the Zerga who stepped onto the pad is dead. He's gone. It's a suicide booth with a really good marketing team. The tech bros want to sell us the prestige trick, the illusion of continuity, while the pile of dead bodies stacks up under the stage. The soul is the driver. The body is the rental car. And no matter how good you are at forging documents and hot wiring vehicles, you cannot counterfeit a soul. That's God's intellectual property. That's his copyright. That's his trademark. Once the soul leaves the body, there is no USB port, no Ethernet cable, no QR code that transfers you into a new chassis. Even if you could extract a soul, which is already a contradiction, because a soul is not a substance, it's a presence, what happens next? You place it into another body. Congratulations, you didn't cheat death, you just committed a metaphysical carjacking. Brother, this isn't a video game. This is metaphysics monopoly. You die, you go directly to go. You do not pass go. You do not collect $200. You go straight to the afterlife, the real arena, the one where your actions echo in eternity. People act like God is some cosmic IT help desk, patching and updating souls, troubleshooting immortality like, have you tried turning your body off and turning it back on again? No. When the soul leaves, that's the final shutdown sequence. Eternity boots up. You are no longer in the realm of clay, carbon, and cortisol. You're in the realm of essence. And that's what the tech bros never understand. They can build a perfect genetic replica of Zerga, but they cannot build me. Even if they had a mad scientist somewhere in the basement of CERN, stirring souls like lattes and pouring them into androids, that wouldn't be immortality. That would be possession. And if there's anything the Bible, the Quran, Enoch, Plato, and every ancient tradition agrees on, it is that possession is not a human power. If immortality is childish metaphysics, then the warrior's perspective exposes it instantly. Because without death, without the real chance of losing everything, there is no courage, no honor, no sacrifice, no greatness. Death is the crucible that creates the warrior. Death is the backdrop that creates the hero. Death is the limit that makes bravery meaningful. Imagine Alexander the Great as an immortal. Would anyone have followed him? An immortal general is not inspiring, he's just annoying. He's like that boss who says, we're all in this together, but he has a golden parachute and you're an intern. Imagine General Patton knowing he couldn't die. The man would have driven a tank through Paris traffic yelling, lights are suggestions. Where is the courage in that? Imagine MacArthur returning to the Philippines saying, I shall return, because I literally cannot be harmed and have infinity years to do it. No one would care. It would be as dramatic as me saying, I shall return, to the refrigerator. The warrior ethic collapses without mortality. Honor collapses without risk. Virtue collapses without sacrifice. Every epic, every myth, every sacred text is built on this one premise, a man dies. But how he dies reveals what he lived for. Leonidas mattered because he died. Joan of Arc mattered because she died. Jesus Christ mattered because he died. Your grandparents who protected their families during impossible times mattered because they could have died. If you remove the possibility of death, every heroic story becomes slapstick comedy. Imagine Braveheart without death, it becomes Bravehug. Imagine Saving Private Ryan where nobody dies, it becomes Finding Private Ryan for an inconvenient conversation. Death is not the enemy of honor. Death is the price that gives honor its currency. And this brings me into something I learned not from a philosopher or theologian, but from Captain James Tiberius Kirk, a man whose fictional swagger contains more truth than half the living political class. Kirk became legendary because he was the only Starfleet cadet to beat the Kobayashi Maru, the infamous no-win scenario designed specifically to teach officers that death cannot be outsmarted. The whole point of the simulation was to confront mortality, accept loss, and learn courage under conditions where survival was impossible. But Kirk cheated. He hacked the system. He rewrote the rules so he couldn't lose. As a kid, I thought that was badass. As an adult, I understand the subtext. Kirk didn't win. He only delayed the lesson. Life eventually gave him a real Kobayashi Maru in the form of losing Spock. And Spock, the hyper-logical Vulcan who said, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, understood something our immortality-obsessed culture refuses to face. Meaning comes from sacrifice. Virtue comes from limitation. A world without death would be a universe without heroes. Immortality would be the ultimate Kobayashi Maru cheat, an illusion of victory that abolishes the entire point of courage. Without mortality, every choice collapses into triviality, because nothing is ever truly at stake. Remove death and you remove the soul's gravity. Which brings me to the samurai, the Bushido warriors who understood what modern man cannot, acceptance of death as the foundation of life. In the Hagakure, the samurai is instructed to meditate on death every morning. Not out of morbidity, but clarity. Death gives shape to courage. Death unclutters the mind. Death strips away cowardice and indecision. A samurai who already considers himself dead cannot be bribed, intimidated, or manipulated. He is free in the truest sense. His duty becomes his compass. His integrity becomes unbreakable, and because he accepts death, he lives more intensely, more honestly, more presently than any transhumanist futurist or corporate longevity junkie could ever comprehend. The samurai knew that life is not something you hoard, it is something you spend wisely. A warrior who refuses death is not a warrior, he is a frightened child with a weapon. But a warrior who embraces death, That is a man whose soul has weight. That is a man who cannot be owned. And here is where the warriors of the West meet the warriors of the East, because even the Norse understood the same paradox. Valhalla was not for those who survived. Valhalla was for those who fell with honor. The glory was not in extending life, it was in offering it. You earned Valhalla not by hoarding your days but by spending them in the highest currency: courage, sacrifice, integrity. A life without death could never produce a warrior worthy of Valhalla. Eternal beings cannot become legendary, because legend is carved against the grain of mortality. The immortality chasers of Silicon Valley are not candidates for Valhalla, they are would-be elves of a Tolkien realm they do not understand, creatures seeking endlessness without wisdom, stasis without sacrifice. But the Norse sagas remind us, the feast is reserved for those who lived fully, fought bravely, died well, and understood that eternity is not owned, it is bestowed. And if Valhalla is the Norse echo of this truth, Gladiator gives us the cinematic roar of it. When Maximus brushes his hand through the wheat in Elysium, he does so not because he escaped death, but because he embraced it. His journey ends in peace only because he accepted the price. What we do in life echoes in eternity, he tells his men. Not, what we extend forever echoes in eternity. Maximus' power, his moral gravity, comes from the fact that his life is finite. That his time is limited. That his death is imminent. And when he dies, he sees his family not because he avoided death but because he went through it. Gladiator is the theology of mortality wrapped in a battle epic. Death is not the enemy. Dishonor is. Cowardice is. Living a life unworthy of Echo is the true tragedy. Maximus shows us that an honorable death completes the arc. A man who dies well is not defeated, he is fulfilled. A man who refuses to die, who clings to life at the expense of meaning, is not living, he is only lingering. And then comes the greatest absurdity of all. The people who fear death the most are the ones who talk the most confidently about the afterlife, even though they admit, if pressed, that they have no idea what eternity actually means. We are finite creatures pretending we can comprehend infinity. It's cute, in the same way that a hamster trying to do taxes is cute. Even the Bible struggles to describe heaven. Even prophets and mystics, after glimpsing the eternal, come back and say things like, it was indescribable. Which is holy man code for, my brain is a potato compared to what I just saw. We are creatures of inches and minutes and calories and paychecks. We measure everything. We quantify everything. Even love, we measure that with holiday expectations and anniversaries. I myself, surrounded by assholes, corporate stress, panic attacks, and the everyday insanity of modern America, find it hard to imagine eternal peace. I can't even get 5 minutes of peace in a Walmart parking lot. How am I supposed to conceptualize a billion years of divine serenity? And hell, eternal damnation, even that is incomprehensible. Our minds weren't built to hold the infinite. We are containers designed for the temporary. So when people say, I don't want to die, what they mean is, I don't trust the next stage because I don't understand it. But that's exactly the point of faith. You're not supposed to understand eternity while stuck in a body built out of meat and cortisol. We paint heaven and hell with crayons because that's all our minds can hold. And the tragedy, we don't admit it, we swagger around as if we're experts on paradise or damnation, when really we're just scared children pretending we've been to the other side and took pictures. This is where the absurdity kicks in. It's hilarious, really. It's a George Carlin routine written by a sadistic cosmic playwright. We spend the first 20 years of our lives dying to be adults. Oh, I can't wait to be 18, I can't wait to be 21. Then we spend the next 40 years working ourselves to death to pay for a life we don't have time to enjoy because we're at work. We buy things we don't need, with money we don't have, to impress people we don't like. And then, we spend the last 20 years spending all the money we saved just to stay alive for 5 more minutes. I need to eat this kale so I can live to be 90. Why? So you can spend 10 extra years watching daytime TV and forgetting your grandkids' names. So you can sit in a chair and drool while a nurse treats you like a toddler. It's vanity. It's the ego screaming, I am important. I must persist. The world cannot spin without me. Newsflash. You aren't that important. Neither am I, and that is the most freeing thought you can possibly have. It's the penny wise, pound foolish approach to existence. We save up our days, like misers hoarding pennies, but we spend our virtue, like drunken sailors. We cheat, we lie, we ignore our neighbors, we ignore the poor, all to secure a slightly more comfortable tomorrow. But tomorrow is a promissory note that might bounce. The only thing you have is right now. If you are a Christian, you believe in the resurrection. So why are you so terrified of the grave? It's like standing at the door of Disney World and refusing to go in because you're afraid to give up your ticket. The ticket is meant to be used. Hand it over and go on the ride. Platonism comes in here like a quiet, uninvited guest with the most important point of the evening. The forms, truth, beauty, goodness, justice, are eternal. My body is closer to a rental car. I've driven this particular model hard. Off-road into addictions, over speed bumps of bad choices, slamming the emotional brakes, ignoring the spiritual, check engine, light for years. The upholstery smells like Taco Bell and regret. There's a rattle in the transmission that I've named anxiety. At some point, returning it is not just inevitable, it's appropriate. The problem isn't that the car goes back, the problem is whether I learned how to drive at all. Was I a lunatic flooring it through school zones of other people's hearts, or did I finally learn to handle the wheel? Eternity isn't the question of whether I keep the car, it's the question of whether I became the kind of driver who can be trusted with any vehicle again. Esoteric traditions, like the ones Manly P. Hall loved to unpack, use the coffin not just as a symbol of decay, but of initiation. The old self has to die. The false personality, the mask I present to keep my job, my reputation, my fragile ego, has to be entombed so something higher can rise. Jordan Maxwell wasn't wrong to say symbols rule more than words. The skull, the crossbones, the grave, these can paralyze me with terror, or, if I insist on thinking it through, they can become reminders, you have limited time. Stop being fake. It's like that scene in Fight Club where Tyler Durden burns the narrator's hand with lie. This is your life, and it's ending 1 minute at a time. It's brutal, it hurts, but it wakes you up. The pain of mortality is the chemical burn that brings you back to reality. When I loop this back to theology, the biblical narrative suddenly looks less like a sadistic punishment and more like a severe mercy. After the fall, God blocks the way to the tree of life. As a kid, I thought that was harsh. Why not let us live forever? As an adult, I see the logic. An immortal, fallen humanity would be an eternal disaster. Imagine being stuck in your worst psychological state forever, no chance of reset, no escape from your own corruption. Imagine your worst day on repeat, but this time it's not Groundhog Day with character growth, it's just the meltdown with no redemption arc. Hell isn't, for me, primarily a place of fire, it's being locked permanently inside my lowest self. In that light, death becomes a boundary drawn in love. You will not be allowed to ossify in this broken condition. You will be interrupted. The cosmic director will not let the worst scene be the final cut. The Book of Enoch, Sitchin's Anunnaki myths, and all the wild stories of hybrid giants and forbidden technologies read like symbolic warnings. Those who try to hack the structure of reality for ego, bypassing limitation and responsibility, end up creating monstrosities. The Nephilim of old, the Frankenstein gene edits of today, the transhumanist chimera of tomorrow, these are all versions of the same archetype. I want power without death, pleasure without consequence, godhood without surrender. That project always collapses. Always. It's like a Hollywood franchise that keeps pumping out sequels long after the soul has left the building. You can pour in more CGI, more explosions, more cameos, but if there's no sacrifice, no limit, no risk, the audience stops caring. It becomes Fast and Furious 27, where cars fly into space and nobody dies, and you leave the theater feeling empty because physics and logic were murdered in the first act. Meanwhile, I look around modern culture and it feels undead. We keep rebooting the same movies, recycling the same political arguments, propping up leaders who look like they've already met the Undertaker and just refused to leave. Max Planck said science advances one funeral at a time. He was more right than he knew. So does art, morality, civilization itself. The forest needs fire. When we suppress every blaze, we don't save the forest, we create a tinderbox. When old ideas, structures, and bodies refuse to die, new growth suffocates. Zombies don't just exist in horror, they exist in legislatures, boardrooms, and institutions that insist on staggering forward long after their purpose has expired. It's Weekend at Bernie's applied to Western civilization. We're just dragging a corpse around with sunglasses on, pretending it's dancing. There's a cosmic joke running underneath all of this, and once I hear it, I can't unhear it. I spend my youth dying to be older. I can't wait to be 18, 21, free. Then I spend the bulk of my adult life working myself half to death to buy things and status I'm too exhausted to enjoy. Then I spend my old age spending everything I earned just to buy a little more time, as if I can bribe the clock. The whole arc is, let me trade my present away so I can secure a future where I can finally live, and then the future shows up with a walker and blood pressure meds. That's not a tragedy, that's a badly written farce. It's like watching a movie where the main character spends the entire film saving up money to buy a ticket to the movie you're already watching. The Christian claim of resurrection exposes my hypocrisy. I say I believe in life after death, that I trust Christ defeated death, and then I hoard my days like a miser hoarding coins. I treat my life like a ticket I refuse to surrender at the gate, while the ride I supposedly believe in waits on the other side. If the resurrection is true, death is not a void, it's a door. If I'm honest, what I fear isn't non-existence, it's judgment, exposure, the possibility that all my excuses will evaporate in the light of truth. So I hide my fear of judgment behind a performative fear of death. I act like I'm scared of the dark, when really I'm scared of the light switching on. It's like the ending of The Sixth Sense. I'm terrified to realize that I've been the ghost the whole time, haunting a life I was supposed to be living. But there is another way to live, and this is where I feel the logic forcing me to choose. I can chase immortality, cling, bargain, compromise, and die anyway, exhausted and unprepared. Or I can accept death as a boundary condition and start focusing not on living forever, but on living well. A good death, as I'm slowly defining it, is a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that means something. Maybe it's a period, calm and complete. Maybe, if I really steward what I've been given, it becomes an exclamation point. What it is not, if I can help it, is an ellipsis of unfinished thought and unresolved cowardice. Without death, there is no real sacrifice. I can't lay down my life, if my life can't actually be laid down. Christ's crucifixion reverberates through history precisely because it confronts the limit. If the story were, Jesus lectured everyone for 2,000 years and then wandered off, nothing would have shifted. Death gives the gift its weight. When a soldier, a parent, a friend chooses to risk or spend their life for someone else, the power of that act comes from the fact that this is finite. An immortal creature that can't really lose can't really love. Love without vulnerability is just sentiment. Love with death breathing down its neck, that's glory. So here is where my audit of myself lands. Fear of death turns me into a slave, acceptance of death turns me into a free agent. If I cling to this life as if it were everything, the corporatists, politicians, and shadowy managers of the world can herd me like cattle with threats and promises. If I accept that I will die, that my expiration date is already printed on the underside of my soul, even if I can't read it, then I can finally ask the real question, given that I will die, how shall I live? Not, how long can I stretch this? But, how deep can I go while I'm here? I don't want to arrive at my death with a full tank. I don't want the Reaper to find me padded, protected, and unused, wrapped in original packaging like some collector's edition action figure nobody ever played with. When he comes, and he will, I want to be scuffed, dented, soul sore, and spent in the best sense, having used my time to pursue truth, practice love, learn courage, and dismantle illusions. I want to look like the Millennium Falcon, a piece of junk to the naked eye, but the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy because it's been through the wars and came out the other side. I want to be able to say, you're not robbing me, you're releasing me. There's nothing left for you to steal, I gave it away while I had the choice. Death is not the opposite of life, it's the opposite of birth. Life is the arc in between, how I respond to finitude, how I dance under the ticking clock, how I refuse to become the undead in a world that worships safety over meaning. Immortality in this broken world is not salvation. It is entrapment. The expiration date is not an insult. It is the very thing that gives life value. It is the frame that makes the painting beautiful. It is the limit that gives the story meaning. And brother, that is why I reject immortality. Not because I fear death, but because I refuse to live a life without meaning. I refuse to live a life without urgency. I refuse to be cattle on the Archon's farm. I refuse to be the immortal infant of Silicon Valley's fever dream. I refuse the Ponzi scheme of the ego. I choose to live with the expiration date in full view. I choose to live before I die. I choose to give everything while I still have a body to give it through. Because death is not the enemy of life. Death is the teacher of life. Death is the architect of meaning. Death is the only truth that forces us to become who we are. This is the final cut, the director's edit, the unrated version of the truth. We are not meant to be statues in a museum, preserved and pristine. We are meant to be fireworks, brief, explosive, and beautiful against the dark. And when the sparks fade, we don't mourn the fire, we celebrate that it burned at all. So let the transhumanists have their hard drives and their clones. I'll take the rental car with the dents and the Taco Bell smell, and I'll drive it until the wheels fall off, straight into the sunset, laughing all the way to the recycling center in the sky. Zerga, in synthesis with the philosopher.